super helpful, because in the end, you have to understand that people give to people. Even if you write a great proposal, if nobody knows you at that donor's office, you probably will get a little bit less attention. Maybe, people will not remember you that well. So if you have a personal connection already established, that is always going to be helpful. Also, you have to remember that donors receive many proposals for each call. So it can be in the hundreds, sometimes in the thousands if it's a global call. So obviously it's very difficult for them to go through every single proposal with the same level of attention, the same level of attention to detail. So if you know someone there and you can write in your cover letter, well, I've talked to you last week, or remember we met at this conference and we've had a chat last week, then the attention is always going to be bigger, and the attention is always going to be on the proposal a bit more, and they will remember you, which is going to be super helpful. That doesn't mean that you cannot submit a proposal if you have no contacts. You can also do that, and you can also win proposals and grants with that, obviously. If it's an open application process, sometimes they even ask you to not contact them. So then you have to go through that procedure, and it will still work in many times, because obviously still the most important thing is the quality of your proposal. But it's always helpful if you are able to connect beforehand. That doesn't mean that you have to go personally, because that can be very difficult as well. But if you can, like if your office is situated in the same town, in the same city as a donor's office, then I would try to take advantage of that. Otherwise, a phone call or a Zoom meeting is always great to connect, because then you still have that personal connection. Also, we always talk about the importance of networking and the importance of reaching out to gather more information about what the donor actually wants to see in a proposal, so you can get more information from the donor in that process of collecting intelligence. And obviously that's very useful. And sometimes they will not put that in writing. So if you just have email contact, it's the first step, but they will not tell you everything, obviously. But if you have a phone call on the phone, maybe they will be a bit more open to tell you some more details that I wouldn't want to put in writing. Because obviously if they put things in writing, maybe they feel like there's going to be some legal issues attached with that, or something, that you can pin them down on it, etc. But if they just tell you something, sometimes that is the more valuable information. So trying to get a personal contact is great. You can also use, and then if you go to a conference, for example, if you travel to, let's say, New York to attend a conference or something, you get invited, you can use that time to try to organize meetings with donors who have their offices in those cities, because then if you meet someone personally, obviously that's the strongest connection. But it's not always needed. A phone call or a Zoom conversation works just as well. And again, if you have no way of connecting with someone, obviously you can still send a proposal, but you will have a lot of advantages if you can manage to connect beforehand. There's one question in the Q&A box already by John. For an absolutely new organization that has no connections or has no known reputation with funding organizations, what would be the best techniques to get started? And that's a great question as well. And that's a question that we also got beforehand. So that is something that I know is on your minds that many struggle with. So I think, first of all, many donors only want to work with NGOs that have some experience level, that have a couple of years of working in the sector, etc. So if you don't have that, if you have no connections, no recommendations, obviously, as you know, that can be a challenge. One thing you can do is to start with small grants. That is something that we recommend, that you first look for very small grant programs. And small grant means the definitions are a bit different. For some, it means just up to 10,000. Sometimes it means up to 5,000. Sometimes it only means up to 1,000. I think the largest sum that was still labeled as a small grant I've seen was 20,000, but it's relatively small amounts of money, because with that, oftentimes you don't need all that experience. You can even apply if you are young, if you don't have any experience as an organization, and if you're recently established. The other plus side of this is, if you start with small grants, you also learn how to manage that money, because it's not that easy. If you get a huge grant immediately and you have no capacities of managing that money, that's going to be a huge challenge for your NGO. No? If you have to write the report, you have to collect all the invoices, etc. That can be a challenge if the sum is very high and you don't have the staff that can manage that. So with small grants, you slowly grow into this managing grants, working with grants, and that is super helpful. And again, many of those organizations don't require a lot of experience, etc. The first go-to thing for me is always to check the embassies, because oftentimes embassies in countries with in developing countries have some budget for small grants, and if you can get into that, that's always a great way to start. And then once you've finished a small grant, you can ask that organization for a recommendation, and then from there you can move on, because that way you collect experiences. That is super helpful. And then obviously entering partnerships is a great way, and that is connected to the second question that we got here. Do you think that joining together in a consortium can help African NGOs? It's a question by Abu, to access easy funding. How can we join together? And I think joining as NGOs is a great way, because we will also see many calls for proposals where that is asked, where they only want applications by a consortium. They all want you to work together, to go together, and to only apply if you are a group. And I think the idea behind that is obviously that you can share specific resources. So for example, if you need an accountant or you need office buildings, etc., you can share that, and then the cost will be lower. You can also share expertise. Maybe you have somebody else has someone on team that is very good in accounting, and somebody else is very good in project management, etc. So you can join forces and can become more productive. The risk is more diversified, because the donors can work with a consortium, and even if one NGO, for whichever reasons, drops out, then the others are still there and are still going to be good partners. So there's many upsides to this. And also, when you're a small NGO just starting out, if you can join a consortium with other NGOs that have more experience, then that is going to be super helpful, because then you can collect that experience and collect the years on your registration form, etc., while already working with others. Obviously, that also has some downsides, because if you enter a consortium, if you work with others, that also means that obviously you probably have to adjust your plans a bit. You cannot implement 100% your own plan. You have to look at what the other members of the consortium want to do and how they want to go about it, and then you have to adjust to that. And the money, if you apply for a grant, you have to share, obviously, the grant. So you have to be careful that you only apply to opportunities that have enough money in the grant program, so that that it's enough to actually implement this. You need to make strict rules and define who has which responsibility and who gets how much money beforehand, because usually what we see is when NGOs enter into a conversation, everybody's like, yeah, great, and we'll have a partnership and work together and blah, blah, blah. And then once the money comes in, then suddenly everybody tries to make their claim and get as much as possible. And so you obviously have to make those rules beforehand and write them down in a proper contract. So be sure that everybody knows what are the responsibilities, who has which task, who has to fulfill which part of the program or the project, and how much money will be allocated to that. And write that down in a contract, in an agreement that everybody has to sign. Because again, though this is also obviously the success rate of the project. If one partner doesn't do their work, the entire project might fail, and you will also get blamed for that. So just be very careful in choosing the partners in a consortium that you want to work in, choosing the people that you do want to enter a partnership with, because obviously they have to be reliable, and it has to be fruitful for everyone. But I think if you look at all those things, entering a partnership, a consortium is a great way to access more funding, because you bring more to the table, and donors really like that. They want that. And especially if you have a consortium of different legal forms of organizations, you might be able to enter or to access different funding sources that wouldn't be accessible to you if it's just yourself. So if you are an NGO and you partner with a business, and maybe with an official entity as well, or a university, you will have access to different kind of funding than if you're just an NGO or just a business. So because every call has different rules for who can apply. So keeping that in mind, I think in general, it's a great idea. You just have to be really careful to make proper rules, to write it down, and to make sure that everything is straightened out before the money flows in, because once you have the grant, it is very difficult. Then there's another question, how can we get a donor directory as a small NGO when we don't have a lot of funding? And well, it's a bit, you can make your own. And if you look at services that are out there, when we're starting that way, many of them are paid after some point, but we also, for example, we have our own service. It's called donordatabase.org that you can check out, and it's free for a week. And then you only have to pay after 1 week. So that's a great way. If you take enough time, if you use that week strategically and really kind of use it to get as much benefit out of the platform as possible, then that's a good way. The same goes for a couple of other platforms, but you can also kind of start your own donor directory. If you do research, use the research techniques that we show you in all of our webinars and in our courses, you can find many donors and create an Excel file that will then be your own donor directory. So that way you can always access this and find good donors that you have identified that are a good donor fit for you. But yeah, if you want an easy start, I recommend you check out our database, which is called donordatabase.org, that you can try out and maybe have a good starting point for your further donor research. Okay, I think those were the questions that are in the box for now. Let's see what other questions we have. And so there's a question by Victoria that we received beforehand. Is it a good practice to draft proposals and tweak or update them when a funding opportunity arises? Okay, so when the general idea is already clear in this, you cannot send one proposal to different donors. You always have to adjust your proposal very specifically to that specific donor. It's like with a job application. If you send the same job application to 20 jobs, then you probably will get a very low response rate. But if you adjust it to every single employee, then people will answer to your job applications. And it's the same in fundraising. You really have to adjust your proposal to what the donor wants to see. So what I always suggest is to not start with the proposal, but to start with the project plan. To write a project plan about exactly what you want to do, what your plan is, what your approach is. Without already having any donor in mind, but just what you and your organization want to do. That project plan will have very similar parts than a project proposal, but it's not the same because you're not writing it for a specific donor, you're writing it for your own organization and for yourself. There's a couple of tools you can use, like the problem tree methodology. You have to think about the impact that you will have, who you want to work with, etc. And we also have plenty of resources about how to develop a great project plan. We also have a webinar, an online course, etc. So you can check all those out. When you start with that and then go out and find opportunities where to apply, then you obviously have to adjust the project plan every time a little bit to make a proposal out of it, but you will not lose your direction. I think if you start by writing a proposal for a specific donor and then you keep tweaking that proposal, the risk is higher that you kind of get derailed from what you actually want to do as an organization. That is called mission creep. It's when organizations start writing proposals that are so geared towards what a donor wants to see instead of what they actually want to do, just to get the funding, that you're actually doing projects that don't really contribute towards your theory of change anymore, because you're just adjusting it to what the donors want to see. And long term, if you have some good ideas about how your work is going to affect the lives of the people that you work with, and you feel like, oh, our strategy, our theory of change is what is working, then you should stick with that, and you should make sure that every project you do is aligned with that, because otherwise you will never reach or achieve your mission if you're not aligning all your projects with it. So I think starting with a project plan instead of a proposal, and then adjusting the project plan every single time when there's an opportunity to make a proposal out of it, is a good way, because then you have that base, and that's where you can start from. And also, when you have a project plan, there's different donors will have many very different focus points or focus areas that they want to fund in, but you will not only be looking for one. Even if you do, for example, I used to work in Nepal, and we had an agricultural project where we promoted agroforestry as an alternative. So at first glance, you would think, well, okay, so they can apply to foundations that support agriculture. But obviously, because we would have specific projects that would take the workload off of girls, so we could also apply within projects for foundations that would fund gender equality. We also were combating poverty, so obviously livelihood development, etc. All of that was also part of it. We could also apply not only for the agricultural side, but for the ecological side, because all the techniques we were promoting are also good for the environment. So there's so many different angles that you can look at the project from, and different kind of donors that you can talk to with the one project. So I think it's easier if you have your project plan and then you look at it from different angles, instead of having a proposal that is already geared towards one specific kind of donor and then having to change a lot of it if you want to apply with a different donor. And yeah, I hope that answers the question, that it's good to have something that you want to start from and adjust it to every donor, but I would recommend this not to be a proposal, but a project plan that you develop with your team for your own organization. Then there's a question in the box again by Abu. Does Philanthropia accept? So I think if we offer the service of writing proposals for NGOs, and if we don't, why not? We don't, because we believe that proposal writing in of itself is nothing that you should really outsource. Because if you pay someone to write the proposal for your organization, then if there's another opportunity coming along, you have to pay someone again, and again and again. But proposal writing is something that you need within your organization. So that's a skill that you should develop within your organization. What we do is we train people to learn this. So we support you to develop the capacity within your own NGO, because that is a repetitive skill that will happen over and over again. And if you have to pay someone from the outside every single time, then that's a huge issue. There's other things that you can outsource that we also do offer at a scale, which is, for example, donor research. because that is a task that you do once a year, and then you just have to update the file, and it doesn't have to be done every single time that there's an opportunity. So we believe that that is actually helpful for NGOs if we support them in that field. But proposal writing itself is something that you have to do anyways in your organization, because even if we would step in and say, okay, we can help you, you would still have to do 90% of the work, because no consultant knows your work properly. You do. You have all the information, you have all the skills of describing your project, you know the target group, you know the communities you want to work with. All of that knowledge is within you, and no consultant can do that properly for you. Also, an important part of the fundraising process and of proposal writing is networking. And again, that is something that you should never outsource, because if the consultant networks for you, then they take all of that important information and all those connections with them. Because if the consultant then decides to work for someone else, they can they take those connections away from you, because the donor then will not remember you, but the consultant, obviously, if they talk to them. So networking is something you should never, ever outsource, because you want to keep that information, you want to keep those connections. That is why we approach it that way. And there's some consultants, and that's a system that we get asked to sometimes as well, if we would accept to be only paid on a commission basis when the proposal is successful. And at first glance, that sounds interesting. No, it sounds like a system that would be good. But you have to keep in mind that you can never pay consultants out of the project budget. That is not allowed by almost no foundation, no donor. So you would have to take that money out of a different kind of budget. So you need money within your organization, which is often not there. And also, if you only pay a consultant if the proposal is successful, you have a very high risk that the consultant would put stuff into the proposal to win, but that's not really good for you, because then they have a self-interest that the proposal should win, because they only get paid if the proposal wins. But it's probably not always the very best thing for you. So that's like the motivation will be different, and that is a risk that you, in my opinion, shouldn't take. So that is why we do not offer that specific service. We do a little bit of consulting, we support if necessary, but we do not write proposals. In this November, we have a class, for example, it's a master class in proposal writing. So it's going to be a month with 8 webinars, live sessions, a lot of resources, access to courses, access to the database, etc. It's a full package course. And with that, we also offer 1 hour one-on-one consulting with me. So in those hours, you can ask all questions, we can talk about a proposal, etc. So that is, again, something that we do offer, but it's more so that you learn how to do it yourself in the future, because that's a skill that you that you need as a focus, and that you need as a skill within your organization. My team will put the link to that November masterclass in the comments if you're interested in that, because I think that would be super helpful for many of you to develop those skills, and to also have that interaction with people, being able to talk through things, and also that one-on-one consultation, I think is super helpful. Whenever I do that with NGOs, they always take away a lot from that. Yeah, the next question is connected to that as well. Then there's a question by Stafford, how to engage donors when they say or when they don't solicit proposals, so when there's no open calls. Well, that is a very good question, because we actually believe that that has high potential, specifically in the development field. So my colleague here has been working in the sector for over 20 years, and he has collected a lot of data, and he says by now that that he believes that 70% of all the money given for development projects internationally is actually negotiated and not given out through open application processes. So that doesn't mean that it's corrupt or that it's like giving under the table, not at all, but it's a different kind of giving because people want relationships. They want to know you before they give you money. And I've noticed that especially when there's crisis situations, many times. For example, I was working in Nepal after the earthquake, and when that happened, a lot of money was reimbursed immediately to existing connections by donors, because suddenly they had a lot of money that they had to spend, and obviously they gave it to people they already had a connection with. So that again speaks to the importance of donor networking, of connecting with people, of developing a relationship even when there's no open call for proposals. And that is also how you get to the point that you can send in proposals, even when on the website it says don't send unsolicited proposals. Because when it says that, that doesn't mean we do not fund you. It just means don't send us a proposal if we don't know you. So one thing you can do to try to connect to those foundations is to see if you know anybody at that donor's office, if you have any connections. Maybe someone went to the same university as you did, maybe someone's from the same community, from the same country, whatever it might be. Try to connect with them. Try to send them an email and get a phone call, get a meeting with them, talk to them. LinkedIn is a great way to connect with people because they tend to reply much more than if you write them an email. I've had way better success rates on LinkedIn. And then you can start a conversation and also think of different ways you can collaborate with them, not only about the money, not only about funding, but also maybe you can offer them data, maybe you can offer them information from the field that could be very interesting for them. Maybe you can offer them pictures or something like that, because oftentimes donors are super interested in what's actually happening in the field, but they're lacking the connections. So you have to offer something, and a partnership can grow beyond just being about money. And oftentimes, if you have a conversation, if you introduce yourself, if you develop a relationship with someone at that donor's office, you will get invited to send a proposal. Obviously, at some point, you also have to ask, can we send something? And then maybe they will say yes. And that is how you get into those opportunities. You have to build those relationships. That's a lot of work. It's also a time game. This is nothing that will yield a success within 1 or 2 months, but it's always the best way to go, because then if you already have those connections, sometimes by the end of the year, if they have to spend some budget still, they will think of you, they might contact you if they have an opportunity, and you just have way better chances of getting in and getting access to that money. Okay, then there's another question by Calvin, who's already following a lot of the advice that we give. Made contact with many potential partners through email and introduced the work. A good number have responded positively, and there was a number of online meetings held. And the question is, how do we take the engagement to the next level? What are the best practices on once we have identified points of congruence and shared objectives and strategies? I think that's a very good point, because we keep telling you don't ask for money immediately, etc. But at some point you do have to ask, obviously, because if you are interested in working with that specific donor, you could, if you have had a conversation with them and you already know where you could really complement each other in your work, and where your work could help the donor to further their own mission, you can also ask them at some point, we think we can support your mission here and here and here. Would it be okay if we sent you a concept note about what we can do? So at some point you have to get to the point to make the ask, that is called. It's the same if you work with in fundraising with personal donations. Sometimes people network and network and network and network and never actually ask for money, which is also not good, because obviously if you connect with a donor and you do all this and you jump through all the hoops, they know that at some point you probably want funding, and that's what they also have to give. No? So I think at some point you have to get to the point where you just ask, could we send you a concept note? We have this project coming up that we're looking for supporters. Would you be interested to partner with us? Because we believe, and then again, if you have identified those points where you actually overlap and where your work can help them to further their mission, you can just tell, like, we could support you in this and this and this. We can contribute towards your goal of this and this and this. And then if they say no, then you at least know that it doesn't make any sense to kind of invest more time and energy into that specific process. But if they say yes, send us something, then you have to be ready with a concept note, with a short proposal that you can send over, and then maybe be successful. Yeah, but I think the process that you're following is great. Starting by sending out emails, reaching out, organizing a Zoom meeting, identifying where the overlap exists, and then you get to the point where you actually tell them, look, we see ourselves with you on the same page here and here and here. Can we send you a concept now because we have this program coming up? Then there's a question by Dr. Narayan. Some donors have their own proposal formats, and the related government offices also have their own template. Should we adjust to what we have written in principle? Yes, if there's a form that they ask you to fill out, you always have to follow that format exactly to the T, because that is the easiest way for donors to kind of weed out proposals if they don't follow the instructions on the guidelines. And if the guidelines are, you fill out this form, then you have to fill out that form. If the guidelines are right in Times New Roman font size 9, then you have to do that. Even in Germany, I think internationally the numbers are even higher, but even in Germany, if we look at the statistics, at the numbers, in professional calls for proposals where people that work as a fundraiser full-time write the proposals, still 30 to 50% of proposals fail because of those formal issues, because they don't follow the guidelines, because they apply from a country or a province that is not eligible, or they apply with activities that are not eligible, or they apply for too much money or too little money, or they miss the deadline, etc. So whatever the donor tells you, you have to do. Obviously, when you write a project plan and you spell everything out, then you can copy and paste parts of that into the specific corresponding sections of the form. Always double, triple checking if it's really what they are asking for. But yes, you have to follow that format. Otherwise, your proposal will not get read. That is crucial, that you really follow this format. Yeah, and it's the easiest way. I always remember this example when I used to apply for jobs, or when I was an applicant after I finished my university. I always thought, wow, that's so stupid that they have these weird rules, like put your name this way into the subject line and put the job title into the subject line and do this and do that. And I just thought, the most important thing is just the CV. So if I ever have a job to give, I will look at every single CV, I thought to myself, and I will be so fair, and I don't know. And then the first time I actually had to screen applications, and I was the person giving out the job, we received, I think it was like 400 applications for a job, and we had half a day to decide who to invite. So after 5 minutes, I had to give up, and I said, okay, what do? I just look at the formal things that we asked. So we had asked to put the name and the job title and a date, I think, in the subject line. And all the people who didn't do that, we just didn't even look at their stuff, because what donors, I think, first of all, is when they use a form, that means that it's they can compare proposals more easily, because then they can look at the sections and they are exactly the same, and so they see, okay, this person wrote that, the other organization is working with 100 people, this organization is working with 1,000 people, that's the budget, that's the impact they will have, etc. So they can compare it, and often they have a system where they give points. So for each section, you get, I don't know, full points, half points, 10 out of 15, whatever it might be. And to compare that way, you need the same structure. If everybody sends in a different proposal, if one organization sends in 1 page, next one sends in 40 pages, how do you want to compare that? It's super difficult. So that's why they use those forms, and that's why you have to follow them. And also, I think some things they put in because they want to see if you can follow rules. Because to some extent, when you get a grant, you all still have to follow rules. You have to prepare a specific report. You have to hand in receipts in a specific way, and they want to see if you're able to do that, and if you have that kind of attention to detail that it needs to implement a project. So they want to see if you can, get guidelines and implement what it says in the guidelines. And if you can't, oftentimes they take that as an indication that you might also be a bit sloppy in project implementation, even though that might not be the case, but that's, I think, what they take as an indication. So yeah, whenever they give you a format, follow that to the T. But you can obviously kind of use your project plan as a blueprint and copy and paste parts of that, because most of the times it's the same questions. It's the same things they want to know from you. You just have to structure it in a different way. And there's a question about scholarship funding for research. That's a bit different. I mean, the techniques you use in research funding are similar, but in general, it's a bit difficult. I think I would start with asking your university what kind of programs they have and move from there. But it's a bit different from funding for development cooperation, which we are talking about today. And another question by Abu, a very good question. We have some donors that don't accept salary costs. It makes it very difficult to manage the projects. What can we do? Yeah, that is a huge problem. And I also see that very critically, that many donors don't want to include core cost and they don't want to include salaries if it's a project funding, which in my opinion is stupid, because you need the staff, you need the office, you need the insurances, you need all of that to implement a good project. So why not just include that? But unfortunately, as you said, the reality is donors often exclude specifically that cost. So one thing you can do is you can ask if you can, if you're allowed to put in a percentage for core cost. Sometimes that's 10%, sometimes that's 15%, and out of that percentage, you don't have to specify what you use it for. So you can use that to cover salaries and to cover, I don't know, rent and insurances or whatever you might need. Obviously, it's usually not going to be enough, and it's a bit tricky, but that can be one way. The other way is if you can include, it depends a bit. If they say no salaries at all, well, then that's a big issue. Or if they say only project-related salaries, and then sometimes you can justify that somebody has to work for, like an accountant, for example, if you have a big grant, and you have to manage that grant. You need the time, the accountant needs to spend time on that project. So then sometimes you can put 20% of the cost for that accountant and put it into the project cost, because that accountant will work for the project, because writing the report and putting together all the invoices, all of that stuff, all the receipts, that is going to take a lot of time. So sometimes if it's clearly project related, you can put it into the budget. Otherwise, I think that unwillingness of many donors to fund everything and to fund holistically just speaks to the importance of trying to have different kind of donors, different income sources as well. Maybe you can fund part of that through private donations, etc., by co-financing in a different way. If you can build up capital to have some money to spend on salaries if donors don't cover for that, that's always a good thing. Or thinking about other ways to create income, like a social enterprise and stuff. It is a huge challenge and nothing that there's an easy solution to. But there's some ways around it if that is possible, for example, of putting some salaries as part of the project if that is needed. Then there's a question by Joyce. How do I go about a situation where I have contacted a donor as requested, and on doing so, they said they would get back to us, but it has taken a good while. Do you think I should contact as a follow-up? I think yes. I always follow up actually at least 2 times. By the 3rd time, then I just kind of give up. Not in a pushy way, just asking. What I always do is I ask, I send an email and I say, I was just wondering if you needed anything else from me or from us. Not saying like, why do you not answer, but offering more information, like suggesting that there maybe the holdup is because we missed something like that. Obviously, you didn't. You gave them everything they wanted. You are waiting, but that is often the wording that I use with people that I follow up. And then sometimes, yeah, you get an answer. Sometimes you just don't. It's a very tricky to get through, especially if you have no prior connections to that donor, to that office. It can be a challenge. But I would follow up at least 3 times. And if the 3rd time it doesn't work, maybe if you feel like that donor is perfect for you and you had a very good feeling, you can try other channels, maybe through phone. But if you feel like, that was just like a 50% chance anyways, then I would just let it go, because sometimes people just don't get back to you. Also, obviously, email is something that is very easily discarded. If it's very important for you, you could try calling, pick up the phone, because it's so much harder to just tell somebody on the phone, oh, I don't want to talk to you, than to ignore an email. Ignoring an email is very easy. It's something that we're all very good at, me included, because it doesn't talk to you. There's no person attached to it. It's just an electronic thing that you can just easily forget. So if you really want to get through to people, it's always better to call, because then they can't really ignore you. Well, they cannot pick up the phone, but once they've picked up the phone, then they're talking to an actual person, and it's so much harder to just discard that. The next question is also about follow-up. How long do I have to wait before I get a follow-up on my proposal? That is very difficult, different. That depends a lot on the donor. Sometimes they tell you the procedure. Sometimes you can find out on the website when the meeting of the board is that decides about this, but it's usually like 2-3 months is not unusual. It takes that long. Sometimes it's even longer. Sometimes it can be up to 6 months, which is, again, in our practical work, that's not a good time frame, because if you need to know if you can start, if you should look for people, if you should start the project, or at least start the planning. And if you have to wait that long, things change again, and everything. So it's not a good process, but unfortunately, sometimes it takes that long. But oftentimes they will also tell you a date, or they will let you know. You can find the information on the website when the board, for example, of a foundation meets to make those decisions. So you can find that information when you check the website. Yeah, and then someone added that the cost that I was talking about, like the core cost, you can also call that administrative cost. Yeah, there's different terms for it. Usually you can include a specific percentage into a proposal. And yeah, that percentage is, and I've seen 20%, which is a bit more nearer to what it's actually costing. But still, in my personal opinion, that those numbers should be way higher, because it's also when you talk about donations in Germany or in developing countries, you have that discussion a lot at how high should be the administrative cost of an NGO. It should be so low because all the money should go to the project participants. Yes, that's true. But if you like cut edges in the administration right and left, then you also won't be able to do good work. And it's the same with projects. Like if you have 5% of the budget to spend on administration, how good is the administration going to be? It's not going to be good because you can't pay the people properly. How good is how much time is the accountant going to give to make a proper report? Well, not much. So in my opinion, that is something very weird that the donors do, because they kind of cut into their own flesh. But it's not upon me to change those things. I think we all have to lobby more with donors and explain, also to the general public, explain what administration cost means. That doesn't mean that we all pay ourselves an amazing salary. It just means that we try to manage projects properly and in a sustainable manner, and not like just living hand to mouth within these organizations as well. So I think that is something, yeah, that whenever we have the opportunity, we should also lobby for with donors, that this is a stability that NGOs need, that this kind of institutional funding is something that is needed if you want to support NGOs long-term and in a sustainable way, because this just like getting money for a project and then not having follow-up funding and not being able to fund the entire organization with it, that is not what sustainability is. That is just a very short-term thinking. But unfortunately, as you know, it's the reality in many cases today. Maybe we should form a consortium and approach donors and just kind of let them know about those issues that you all have in the field, because yeah, they are very real and I understand completely. So going back to the list of questions, I think we can take one or two more. There was one question about the difference between fundraising and resource mobilization. And I would say they are basically the same. They both talk about, yeah, how to get funding for your project. I know in some countries, fundraising more specifically means donations, private donations or donations by corporations. And resource mobilization is more like grant writing, but in general, they basically mean the same. It's how you get funding for your NGO, how you get money to fund your work. Then there's a very good question: what's the best approach to determine the budget for an unsolicited proposal? Because that can be a bit tricky if you if they don't really tell you how much you can apply for, then how would you know that? And one very good way to kind of gauge how much they give is to look at past projects. So you can, oftentimes a foundation has a section on their website that says projects or past work, and you can check out what they did in the past. And then you can kind of get an idea if they only, yeah, if every project received between 10 and 20,000, well, then that's apparently their range. If it's less, then it's less. So you can kind of find out the size of the projects. You can also check their annual reports. Oftentimes it has information about that as well, especially if you look at the finance section. It will oftentimes give you information about that. If you know anybody, for example, have worked with them, you can also ask your colleagues, obviously, how much did you apply for? What was the range? But then it's also a very good question to start a conversation, because if they tell you no unsolicited proposals, you have to network with them anyways. You have to enter that conversation, and that is a great question, because if you don't know the answer to that, how are you supposed to write a good proposal and send them what they want to see? So asking them about the realistic funding amount that they can give and they want to give is a great question for one of those conversations that you would have with them. Because then often you can even find out what the best funding amount is. Because if they tell you, sometimes it says, even on the website, it says, okay, we fund up to 100,000. And then you call them and you say, oh, up to 100,000. And then they say, well, yeah, but actually, that is like a 1 in 10 years occurrence. So usually we fund up to 50,000. That's very important information for you, no? So that's a great question to enter those conversations. If you have a US donor that you want to find out this information about, you can also check the 990 PF, which is a tax form that they have to publish, where you will find all that information in detail. How you can search those forms and how you can analyze them. We have a free online course about that that you can check out. It's called how to use or work with 990 PFs, I think. I'm sure my team will put the link into the comment section now. And yeah, you can find out how to analyze those 990 PFs to find out how much you can apply for and what the actual grant amount is. Then there's a question. in the box again by Kelvin, there are a few donors, especially in Germany and the Netherlands, who say that they're happy to support your project if the applicant has another partner in the donor country. How to approach this if you have no partner? Well, then you have to find a partner, unfortunately. I know that in Germany specifically, we have that a lot, that the money gets channeled through a German NGO. So a German foundation gives money to a German NGO, and then that's channeled through that organization to the organization in the actual project country. And that's for tax reasons, I think. Many times the donors, the foundations, they don't want to deal with the difficulties of dealing with different legal forms, with invoices, reporting, etc. So they kind of outsource that to the NGO partners in Germany or the Netherlands. But you can obviously reach out. There's if you have a great project and a great idea how to implement that, you can check for NGOs in Germany, for example, that work in the same country, and you can approach them and ask them, look, we have this, we found this opportunity, we would love to apply. Would you be interested in being our partner here? In those cases, that is the only way you can go, because if that is the legal requirement that they have, then they will follow through with that. But I'm sure if you have, and it's a bit the same. I mean, you can approach those NGOs in a very similar way than you would approach a donor. First, trying to connect with them and say, look, we work in the same area, etc., and then hopefully get an answer, get a Zoom call, and try to kind of ease into that partnership. And then again, if you want to do that, then just make sure that everybody knows what their roles and responsibilities are, that you have a proper kind of agreement, contract, however you want to call it, so that everybody knows what they will get out of this partnership. And that can be the start of much more if you develop a good partnership with them. Thank you very much. Sorry, there's one comment also here that these webinars are really helping you. That is amazing to hear. And I always say that, but we often don't get emails. But I would love for you, if you feel like, or if you know that the webinars that we give, the information we share with you is helpful for you and has actually helped you to whatever, organize your fundraising in a different way, or maybe even helped you to connect with donors, helped you to maybe even get a grant. We would love to hear about that. So if you have those good experiences, it would be great if you could share them with us via email or through social media. You can also leave a comment under the post that we share on social media like Facebook or on LinkedIn about the experience that you have with us, because it's really great to know that you all love these webinars, but sometimes it would also be nice to have a little bit more background about these success stories. I love to read those. It's really amazing because we spend a lot of time on this and try to make as many resources as possible available for free to you. And so it's always great to hear if that is actually helpful and it actually helps you to move your NGO along. So if you have a story to share, please feel free to reach out and let us know, because that would be amazing. Then there's a couple of more questions about things that we offer. You can check our website, philanthropia.org, for all the courses and resources that we do offer and that we do have. There is actually a lot of variety in it. I think we don't have anything specifically about project management yet, but we will definitely add that at some point. And we will also add some more information. I think that could be a good topic for an article, maybe, or maybe even an entire webinar on what consultants actually can do, what are things that you could maybe look for from the outside, and what maybe isn't such a great idea. So yeah, the last question by James is about how an individual expert or consultant can combine with an NGO to apply, and how does this enhance the application? Again, I think what you can outsource is, for example, donor research, because then you would get a a list of potential partners that you can then work with. And we're actually working on a package as well, where we offer this this service with also combined with an expert session again, with a one-on-one with me. So once we have that, we will also let you know. But the other thing that you can do is some stuff like proofreading, or like maybe reading a proposal that you've already written and giving feedback on that. That is something you can outsource. But writing the proposal, I think, is not going to be a good idea. Also, all the networking, the sending of the proposal, etc., all of that should be done by you. Because first of all, donors often don't like it because they want to know who you are. They don't want to know who the consultant is. And also, especially if you develop those relationships, then you should take advantage of them, and not the potential, not the consultant, obviously, because they would just take away those connections and use them again also for other customers, obviously, because I mean that it would be their work. So I wouldn't recommend doing that. Okay, thank you very much, all of you, for taking part in this. There's a couple of more links that get shared by my team now. For example, the link to the LinkedIn group, which is always helpful. And yeah, I hope to see all of you again. Please remember our November masterclass. That is an amazing opportunity. And we also have a special prize for people joining from developing countries, where we do really get a month of kind of sharpening your proposal writing skills and sharpening the skills that you need, and to write great proposals. And you also have the chance, or not the chance, I mean, if you join the professional masterclass, we have a 1-hour consultation where we can talk about the things that you have, the issues you have in your NGOs, and ways that we could support you. Thank you so much for joining, and I hope to see you in our next webinar again, which will be on the 12th of October. I think then we'll talk about mistakes in proposal writing, and I hope you will all join again, and I will see you then. Thank you very much, and bye-bye.